Joining me now is California Congressman Ed Royce. He's chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and he's going to be running this hearing today. Good morning to you, sir.
Hello, Chuck. How are you?
I'm all right. Well, let me ask you this basic question. Why is this deal, do you believe this deal is at least better than no deal right now?
You know, this deal, if you can enforce it, but here's the concern that I think members of Congress on both sides of the aisle have. You already have the foreign minister of Iran saying that they're going to continue construction on the plutonium plant, the bomb-making factory there. On Wednesday, he said they're going to continue it, and then you had this comment that they're going to build more of those. So the head of the inspections team, the director of the IAEA, said, look, they've cheated before. How do we get some leverage on this to make certain they don't cheat again? That's the question.
Well, you seem to be, in fact, you, I think, at one point argued of a good cop, bad cop scenario, that you seem to be fine if the administration is negotiating a deal like this, but you think it would strengthen the hand of the administration if you guys passed more sanctions now. Is that still your view?
Well, that we hold these sanctions in abeyance, but remember, we've weakened the sanctions, and that's what got them to the table. So if we pass the types of serious sanctions that could really undermine their economy and give the Ayatollah a choice, and we had that sitting there as a hammer, then we could say, look, if you're out of compliance, then this will befall you. And we know those sanctions can work. We saw sanctions work on South Africa, right? When Congress passed sanctions on South Africa, it forced their hand on apartheid and on giving up the nuclear weapon, which South Africa had at the time.
But so it doesn't sound like you and Secretary Kerry, though, are actually that far apart. Let me play you something of what he said last night at a American-Jewish Joint Distribution Committee speech. Let me play the remarks and have you react to them.
Let me listen.
If we get to the end of these 6 months and they don't do the simple things you need to do to prove your program is peaceful, then we will have kept united the P5+1. We will have shown the global community our bona fides to attempt to give them an opportunity through diplomacy to do what they need to do. And we will not have taken any sanction off the table. We can ratchet them up when we want.
I mean, it sounds like you and Secretary Kerry aren't that far apart. It's just sort of an interpretation of this 6-month deal.
Except for this point. Remember that Secretary Kerry is endorsing the idea of a right to enrich, and that's where the international community was on the other side. You had 6 Security Council resolutions that said they didn't have that right, and we're already concerned in Congress, Republicans and Democrats, that you have a situation where the foreign minister over there already says he intends to be out of compliance with the plutonium reactor, this separate pathway to a bomb besides enriched uranium. So from that standpoint, you know, Congress just watched Rouhani give that speech. And there in the audience were the Basiji militia, you know, and they were yelling death to America. And he said the centrifuges will never stop spinning. So we do have already a rift between the optimism that Kerry sees and, from our standpoint, the necessity of really having a hammer to come down and force compliance. We think he's unraveling sanctions without getting anything verifiable in return. That's our concern right now.
Now, there's an administration view that says you kind of had to do this testing phase with Rouhani to see if it's going to work, if you're then going to be able to ratchet things up more down the road. Do you buy into that view?
Well, the problem is if on Wednesday, the week after the deal, the foreign minister then says we're going to continue construction on the plutonium reactor, that's the time for the Secretary of State to come forward and say, now, wait a minute, this just is not justifiable. This is a violation of the agreement, and to force compliance. What we're beginning to see here instead is that the Iranians are sort of dictating the terms. Well, that may be what the words say, but it's not what it means to us. So from our standpoint, it looks like the zeal for the deal is sort of undermining the practical implementation on verification and on the weapons system actually stopping. Members of Congress that I've talked to have said this. Listen, if we're going to freeze the sanctions, you know, if we're going to ratchet those down, why don't they stop the centrifuges from spinning?
What do you want to hear from Secretary Kerry today that will make you say, okay, I won't push on new sanctions now. I'll at least allow this 6-month window to go?
Well, I think we need to hear some admission that, well, yes, obviously the construction of the plutonium reactor, that is out of compliance. It is in the agreement. Yes, our ambition is to shut down their weapons program as the end game, and we're going to negotiate hard for that end. I'm not sure we're going to hear that. And I think that's why you see on the Senate side senators saying, all right, let's look at ratcheting this up and having something to fall back on should the Iranians not comply, which they're already out of compliance.
But any sanction deal, very quickly, any sanction deal you guys would pass, you would basically make it so that the time wouldn't begin until the 6-month window ran out. You would give the administration that window.
That's what we're looking at.
Okay.
Yes,
Congressman Ed Royce, who's chairing this committee today, and there's also a big hearing you're doing on Afghanistan. I wish I had more time to talk to you about that, but we will get to you another time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
Despite the snow day, it is a busy